Hey everyone, it is Friday, February 14th, Valentine's Day. You are listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts. We read all of the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. As you could tell, it is just me today on this Valentine's Day. Moshe is in Texas visiting his family. And another quick bit of housekeeping. Monday is President's Day, so we'll be off that day. We'll be back on Tuesday. As for today, as usual, a lot of news. So let's get to the headlines. He was one of President Trump's most controversial cabinet picks, but RFK Jr. has now been confirmed as the Secretary of Health and Human Services. What to expect from the department? And another cabinet pick, Linda McMahon, outlines her plans to dismantle the department that she's supposed to run, the Department of Education. In Munich, dozens injured when a driver rammed his car into a crowd. What we know about the driver. Vice President J.D. Vance in Germany ahead of today's Munich security conference. He visited the Dachau concentration camp with a Holocaust survivor. President Trump looking to impose reciprocal tariffs as soon as April. What exactly that means and which countries could be targeted. 3 federal prosecutors resign after the Department of Justice orders them to drop the case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. And it looks like the ceasefire and hostage release deal back on after Hamas says that it will free 3 more Israeli hostages on Saturday, as the original deal calls for. And who's made the list of the highest paid athletes of 2024 with no women cracking the top 100? And it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating. I'll have some President's Day trivia for you, straight from my daughter's Scholastic News. All right, another busy day in Washington. I guess it would be news if it wasn't a busy day. Starting with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He was confirmed Thursday to lead the Department of Health and Human Services.
On this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 48. The confirmation is confirmed.
He'll now oversee one of the largest federal agencies with 80,000 employees and a $1.8 trillion budget, leading global and domestic health initiatives. That final vote, as you heard there, was 52-48 for the second time in 2 days. Mitch McConnell, a Republican from Kentucky, was the only Republican to join all of the Democrats in voting against a Trump cabinet nominee. As Moshe would say, McConnell is in his Maverick era. McConnell used to be the Republican majority leader. He is a polio survivor. He has been critical of RFK's past comments, undermining the effectiveness of vaccines, including the polio vaccine. And he's really stood out among Republicans as one of the lone voices willing to push back on Donald Trump's agenda. RFK Jr. faced contentious confirmation hearings. He faced opposition from the left for his decades of espousing conspiracy theories about vaccines, controversial and false statements about COVID-19, and claims that Lyme disease is a manufactured bioweapon, and also from the right for his past support of abortion rights. So what can we expect from HHS Secretary RFK Jr.? Well, he hasn't spoken much about his plans for Medicaid and Medicare. Senator Bill Cassidy, a Republican from Louisiana, a physician and the chair of the Senate's Health Committee, said that Kennedy promised him that he would not interfere with current vaccine policy and that Cassidy would have oversight over some of his decisions at HHS. Democrats, though, say they are not buying those promises. Senator Patty Murray, a Democrat from Washington, said in a press conference, quote, Republicans are choosing to pretend like it's in any way believable that RFK Jr. won't use his new power to do exactly the thing that he has been trying to do for decades, undermine vaccines. RFK Jr. has also pledged to fund research into chronic diseases, remove toxic chemicals from the American food supply, and pursue what he calls gold standard science. Sticking with Capitol Hill, President Trump's pick to lead the Department of Education, Linda McMahon, had her hearing on Thursday. And it was a bit unusual, given that Donald Trump has called to abolish the Department of Ed. Last week, Trump said he wanted McMahon to basically put herself out of a job. Senator Bill Cassidy, who's getting a lot of play in this podcast, asked McMahon about Trump's plan. She acknowledged that congressional approval would be needed to eliminate the agency altogether, and she vowed that even if it were closed, its services would still be accessible to Americans just through other agencies. Now, in regards to downsizing the department, she said that she and the president hope to make it operate more efficiently. Here is part of Cassidy and McMahon's exchange.
In terms of the plans to downsize, what would be the components of that plan that would not require congressional approval?
Well, I do believe, Senator, that there are departments of education that are established by statute. And in those particular departments, we'd have to pay particular attention to. But long before there was a Department of Education, we fulfilled the programs of our educational system. Are there other areas, other agencies where parts of the Department of Education could better serve our students and our parents on a local level? And I am really all for the president's mission, which is to return education to the states. I believe, as he does, that the best education is closest to the child and not certainly from Washington, D.C.
If the department is downsized, would the states and localities still receive the federal funding which they currently receive?
Yes.
Okay.
It is not the president's goal to defund the programs. It is only to have it operate more efficiently.
So what's next here for Trump's nominations? The Senate Judiciary Committee voted Thursday to advance Kash Patel's nomination for FBI director after fierce opposition from Democrats. A full floor vote could come as early as next week. Heading overseas to Munich, Germany, at least 30 people, including kids, were injured after a car drove into a crowd at a labor union demonstration in Munich Thursday morning. The driver was a 24-year-old Afghan seeking asylum in Germany. He was taken into custody shortly after. Investigators are still looking into a motive, but they say they believe that this attack was deliberate. The suspect was known to police for previous drug and theft offenses. The car ramming brings issues of immigration and security to the forefront of federal elections, which are due to take place on February 23rd. According to the German press agency, the suspect came to Germany in 2016 as a minor, and his request for asylum was actually turned down the following year. He was meant to be deported in the fall of 2020, but he hadn't been forced to leave Germany because of security concerns in Afghanistan. The head of the German state where this happened said something has to change, something in Germany, and quickly. Again, the country has a general election on February 23rd. Immigration has become one of the most controversial and central issues of the campaign. There have been multiple vehicle ramming attacks in Germany in recent years, including a 2016 attack at a Christmas market in Berlin. 12 people were killed. Another Christmas market was attacked this past December that left 5 people dead and about 200 people injured. Now, yesterday's incident happened near the site of the Munich Security Conference. Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio are expected to attend on Friday, along with other world leaders. Police at this point do not suspect that the car ramming attack is connected to the Munich Security Conference. While in Germany, the vice president and his wife toured the Dachau concentration camp. It was one of the first concentration camps built by Nazi Germany and the longest running one. Vance walked through the concentration camp with a 96-year-old Holocaust survivor who was actually once a prisoner there, a site of so much suffering and mass murder. Vance saying, quote, "What happened here should never happen again." He said, "I've read a lot in books, but being here and seeing it up close in person really drives home what unspeakable evil was committed and why we should be committed to ensuring that it never happens again." As for the Munich Security Conference, Vance is scheduled to address the conference today, and he is also slated to meet with Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky. Time for the speed read from Bloomberg. President Trump ordered his administration to consider imposing reciprocal tariffs on numerous trading partners, raising the prospect of a wider campaign against a global system that he complains is tilted against the United States. The president on Thursday signed a measure directing the U.S. Trade Representative and Commerce Secretary to propose new levies on a country-by-country basis in an effort to rebalance trade relations. This is a sweeping process that could take weeks or even months to complete. Howard Lutnick, who's Trump's nominee to lead the Commerce Department, told reporters that all studies should be complete by April 1st and that Trump could act immediately afterward. Here is President Trump talking about the tariffs Thursday from the Oval Office.
And on trade, I have decided for purposes of fairness that I will charge a reciprocal tariff, meaning whatever countries charge the United States of America, we will charge them, no more, no less. In other words, they charge us a tax or tariff, and we charge them the exact same tax or tariff. Very simple. Nobody knows what that number is unless you go by the individual country. You can see what it is if you go to the individual country and you look at what they're charging us. In almost all cases, they're charging us vastly more than we charge them, but those days are over.
Trump telling reporters he would enact import taxes on cars, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals over and above the reciprocal tariffs at a later date. He talked about barriers in the European Union. He also singled out Japan and South Korea as nations that he believes are taking advantage of the United States and therefore could be targeted in this latest push. Reciprocal tariffs would be the president's broadest action yet to address U.S. trade deficits and what he characterizes as unfair treatment of American exports around the globe. He's already imposed 10% tariffs on Chinese goods and plans to slap 25% tariffs on all U.S. steel and aluminum imports next month. But the president's decision not to implement the tariffs right away could be seen as an opening bid for negotiation, following the same strategy that he's already used to extract concessions from Mexico, Canada, and Colombia, rather than a sign that he is committed to following through. Now, some analysis by the global economics correspondent David Lynch over at the Washington Post, he says that this injects more uncertainty into the economy. So a lot of questions, as I just mentioned, about whether or not the president is actually going to follow through here. He also says the fact that there's going to be a different rate on each country could be really tough to understand and also to administer. And he says there's going to be a lobbying bonanza for Trump's favor as nations and companies look for exemptions here. Also want to mention that India's Prime Minister Modi is in D.C. visiting with President Trump, and the president announced a deal to import more U.S. oil and gas as a way to shrink the trade deficit between the United States and India. They held a joint news briefing in which President Trump said of India that they are going to be purchasing a lot of our oil and gas. They need it, and we have it. From the New York Times, Manhattan's U.S. attorney on Thursday resigned rather than obey an order from a top Justice Department official to drop the corruption case against New York City Mayor Eric Adams. Then, when Justice Department officials sought to transfer the case to the Public Integrity Section in Washington, which oversees corruption cases, the two men who led that unit also resigned. The resignations represent the most high-profile public resistance so far to President Trump's tightening control over the Justice Department. Days earlier, the acting number 2 official at the Justice Department, Emil Bove, had ordered Manhattan prosecutors to drop the case against Adams. The justification for dropping the case was that the investigation would prevent Mayor Adams from fully cooperating with President Trump's immigration crackdown. But he did make a point of saying that officials in Washington had not evaluated the strength of the evidence or the legal theory behind the case. Even so, Manhattan's interim U.S. Attorney Danielle Sassoon, in a letter addressed to Attorney General Pam Bondi, said that the order to dismiss the case was, quote, inconsistent, she says, with her ability and duty to prosecute federal crimes without fear or favor and to advance good faith arguments before the courts. For his part, Bove accepted Sassoon's resignation and blasted her handling of the case and decision to disobey his order. Overseas, from the Associated Press, Hamas said Thursday that it would go ahead with the release of 3 more Israeli hostages, paving the way toward resolving a major dispute over the ceasefire deal in the Gaza Strip. The group had threatened to delay the next release of captives after accusing Israel of failing to meet its obligations to allow in tents and shelters, among other alleged violations of the truce. Israel, with the support of President Trump, has said that it will resume fighting if the hostages are not freed. Israel was reportedly pushing for more live hostages to be released in the upcoming days. particularly given the horrible condition of the 3 hostages released last week. But a senior Arab official told the Times of Israel that it was unlikely that Hamas would deviate from this original time frame of the agreement. Bottom line here, the announcement from Hamas allows the ceasefire to continue, at least for now. And it comes after Israel said Thursday that a rocket had been launched from Gaza. Now, it actually landed back inside of Gaza. And there are still a lot of doubts about the long-term durability of the truce, which faces much bigger challenges in the coming weeks. This first phase is set to conclude at the beginning of March, and there still has not been substantive negotiations over the second phase, in which Hamas would release dozens of remaining hostages in return for an end to the war. 73 hostages still have not been released, only about half of whom are still believed to be alive. Okay, in much lighter news now from CNN, Cristiano Ronaldo was the highest paid athlete of 2024. This is according to a list compiled by Sportico. He earned $260 million. No female athletes were in that top 100. So the soccer star's impressive earnings came from $215 million in salary and winnings for Al Nassr in Saudi Arabia and the Portugal national team, and then $45 million through off-the-field endorsements. The 40-year-old has enjoyed somewhat of a career renewal since moving to Saudi Arabia. He scored 82 goals in his 90 games for Al Nassr and became the first man to have 900 career goals in September of last year. So after Ronaldo, Steph Curry is in second, making $153.8 million in 2024, followed by Tyson Fury. He is a British former professional boxer who made $147 million. Lionel Messi, $135 million. LA Lakers star LeBron James with $133.2 million. Dak Prescott was the top earning NFL player. The Dallas Cowboys quarterback reportedly earned about $100.4 million. He finished in the 12th position, by the way. Jalen Hurts, the quarterback of the Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles, he finished in 65th with $46.1 million. And while plenty of male athletes cashed in on their talents, no female athletes were featured in that top 100. U.S. tennis star Coco Gauff, she was the highest earning female athlete last year. At an estimated $30.4 million, she won the doubles title at the French Open and also the singles championship at the end of season WTA finals. According to Sportico, that top 100 list includes athletes from 8 sports and 27 countries. And it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe and I are actually going to be watching the same thing, although not together. SNL 50, the anniversary celebration, that is on NBC. And The White Lotus Season 3 is out on Max. So this season is in Thailand. And a spoiler now for anyone who hasn't seen it. Here's your chance. Turn down this podcast for about 30 seconds while I give away a spoiler from Season 2. One person not returning, Jennifer Coolidge as Tanya McCoy. Her story, of course, ended tragically in Season 2. There were some weird theories going around that perhaps she would be back somehow for Season 3, but she recently said, nope, she is not a part of Season 3. Quote, when they kill you, you have to accept it. Okay, now for what we're reading. Believe it or not, so my daughter came home with a Scholastic News Fun Facts for President's Day, and I read it. So that is what I am reading. They looked specifically at George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. And you know what? Sometimes the way things are broken down for kids, you can actually learn a lot. So I'm going to give you some trivia now based on some of the information that was in this Scholastic News. And you can be honest and see if you know the answers here. So we know George Washington was the first president. What number president was Abraham Lincoln? I wish I had some good music here. Okay, he was the 16th president. Why do we celebrate President's Day in February? I think this is easy, but I'm not sure. It is because both George Washington and Abraham Lincoln were born in February. although years apart, and they were not alive ever at the same time. Both Washington and Lincoln had pets. Washington had a horse named Nelson, and Lincoln had a dog who was named Fido. They would often take walks into town. Washington and Lincoln both enjoyed desserts. George Washington loved ice cream. He even made his own, something that Moshe and George Washington have in common. Although I don't think Moshe makes his own ice cream, but I know he loves ice cream. And Abraham Lincoln loved apple pie or anything with apples. Which brings me to what I am eating this weekend. I actually already ate it. A homemade heart-shaped pizza, courtesy of my kids. My son brought it home from school. We did a little virtual pizza making class, and I have to say the pizza came out pretty good. Although, is there really a way to mess up pizza? I don't know. Moshe, I am guessing, is going to be eating at some great restaurants in Texas. I know that he and his wife Alex had asked you guys for some recommendations over on the Instagram account. So I look forward to hearing about all of the great restaurants that they tried. He could fill us in next week. All right, everyone, that's a wrap, not only on this podcast, but on the podcasts for this week. Thank you so much for listening to the Mo News Podcast. If you like what you hear, share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us and subscribe so you don't miss an episode, and review us in the App Store. We'd really appreciate it. Everyone have a wonderful long weekend. Again, we'll see you back here on Tuesday.